Welcome to Part 7, Ron's Lehigh River Valley. Redington, Steel City, and Freemansburg. Triggs Flying Service on Freemansburg Avenue, just east of Bethlehem, PA, in 1959. I started aerial photography from here in 1958 with Kodachrome film. In 2020, a pharmacy plus hundreds of suburban homes occupy this spot. Wagner Drive is just in the front of the picture. Just minutes from the airport, looking southeast over the Lehigh River in 1959. In the fall of 2000, looking north, Route 33 bridge is well underway. Conrail is under the ownership of Norfolk Southern, but many locomotives are still to be repainted. By winter 2001, the bridge piers are taking shape as an eastbound Norfolk Southern passes. From the north side looking south, just over the Lehigh Canal, a westbound Conrail freight is passing on the south side in April of 2001. The piers are up and overhead structures taking shape in early spring 2001. Hope workers have good legs to climb that ladder. It's early summer 2001. The roadway structure reaches for the south side, reflected in the placid waters of the Lehigh River. Both sides reach for the center. By spring 2002, the bridge was completed. Note eastbound Norfolk Southern freight. A westbound Norfolk Southern freight in October 2002. 10 miles east in 1987, Interstate 78 is under construction. Note difference in bridge piers from the Route 33 bridge. This location is at Phillipsburg, looking west to Pennsylvania over the Delaware River. Railroad is the Belvedere and Delaware branch, an important artery 100 years ago, as 78 is today. An August 25, 1987 article in the Morning Call about Interstate 78 bridge over the Delaware River. Just a few hundred feet west of Route 33 lay Redington. In this April 1982 article, the Morning Call ran the Redington story. There is almost nothing left of Redington today but a few weeds and trees growing up in the crumbling foundations. But in the 1860s, William Carter, a financier and associate of Asa Packer, planned an iron furnace and company town there. Work started on the furnaces about 1867, a few years after the Lehigh Valley Railroad came through. There were 4 company houses, a commissary, church, railroad station, an hotel in the town. By the 1890s, the iron furnaces closed. This photo was taken in 2020, shows the same area as the previous locations. This was the Redington Signal Bridge in 1974. It was torn down shortly after this photo was taken. In the Conrail era, 1976 to 99, a short train passes a weed-overgrown blast furnace next to the East Redington Road. A Norfolk Southern Heritage Unit at Redington Crossing. Norfolk Southern painted 21 of its units in pre-Norfolk Southern colors. They can be seen occasionally on trains in the Lehigh River Valley. The limestone quarry at Redington today. It's an auto junkyard. A train is passing on the Norfolk Southern line in the background. A good 400 men were employed at this quarry, what was formerly known as Lime Ridge. The Redington complex, just west of the quarry. During World War I and World War II, a good 400 men worked here at these locations. Most came from all over the Lehigh Valley by train. Redington was really the armory for the United States government during the war years. No train on curve at end of building. A Conrail freight at previous picture location in 1999. It is now the entrance to the Steel City Gun Club. Huge cannons were here during the First War, testing armor plate. An example of armor plate test on display at the Industrial Museum in Bethlehem. Loading munitions during the war at Redington. It was a very busy place, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The Lehigh Valley Railroad has several spur tracks into this location. All buildings were completely demolished after the Second World War. Just west of Redington, the Lehigh Valley Railroad enters a curve into the little village of Steel City. The streamlined Black Diamond passenger train on the curve in 1940. The dieselized Black Diamond about 1949. Facing the other way, west, a Jersey Central Heritage unit passes the motorcycle hill climb in 2017. The Lehigh Valley Railroad was reduced to double track after passenger train service ended in 1961. Westbound Lehigh Valley Heritage Unit in 2018. O-gauge 2-rail Lehigh Valley Heritage Unit on the railroad layout. All rail is nickel-silver code 148. Wooden ties, 2 thigh plates to each tie, and 4 railroad spikes. You can't get any more realistic railroad track than hand-laid rail. Norfolk Southern took over most of Conrail by 1999. They painted 21 units in the heritage colors by 2012 for a big celebration in Spencer, North Carolina. An aerial view of Steel City and vicinity in 1982. The Asa Packer passenger train passing the hill climb about 1940. Part of the climb is at far right. Hill climbs are held twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. Sponsored by the Bushkill Motorcycle Club. It attracts thousands of fans. A newspaper article about the hill climb. In 8 seconds or so, riders can reach the top. Most of the younger ones are so aggressive they crash on the hill climb. The older, more experienced guys reach the top. An aerial view of Steel City and Railroad Signal Bridge. In the far distance is Bethlehem Steel Martin Tower, which we will cover in the next video. The signal bridge of Steel City was a favorite place to photograph Lehigh Valley trains before the Conrail era. Here in October 1975, number 148 Whippany River is headed to Bethlehem to connect up with George Hart's 972, a 460 steamer. The doubleheader ran a few days later over the Lehigh Valley from Bethlehem to Plainfield, New Jersey, and back. Loco 148 was also used in December of that year for a fan trip over the Jersey Central from Raritan to Bayhead, dressed up as the last run of the Blue Comet. In 1946, the Lehigh Valley called itself the 100-Year Railroad. Here the Black Diamond claims the centennial mark. The rear also carried the centennial sign. Freight trains generally use the 2 tracks near the river. Passenger trains use the tracks near the road. The Black Diamond westbound about 1950. By the time the American Freedom Train came through in August 1976, the semaphores had been removed by Conrail. A short time later, the signal bridge was also torn down. Building a bobber caboose. Rails were built of wood 2x4s cut to T-shape and then painted. Wheels and frame were cut. Finished caboose. Everything wooden except handrails, bolts, nails, and screws. A nighttime exposure. The North Star is the upper right bright one. It's about 3-hour exposure. Leo Osterstock and myself. Leo worked for the Lehigh Valley Railroad for 50 years, retiring in 1975 just before the Conrail takeover. I asked him to write down some of his experiences over that time, but he passed away before that happened. He was about 82 years old at the time. My 1964 Chevelle, which I bought new for $2,700. Chevelles were upgraded versions of the popular 1955, 56, and 57 Chevrolets. Building a Lehigh Valley Railroad tower. 4x4 posts cemented into the ground for the framework. Constructing the roof on the ground and numbered. Parts were then removed and rebuilt the top of the framework. Putting up the siding. Putting up the sunshades, a hallmark of most Lehigh Valley wooden towers. Lehigh Valley freight train passing the Phillipsburg Tower about 1948. Vinyl siding was used on the tower, but the dark part in the bottom was not found to look too well, so I used a lighter color. Color photographs are very difficult to obtain, and you never know what color the structures were. It's a guess at best. Central New Jersey and Lehigh Valley trains raced down the G-gauge line. Aluminum rail was first used and spiked to the ties, each section wired and soldered. Underground cable ran from the house to the tower. Rail line is 350 feet long, just beyond the Conrail property line. Brass track was later used. Trains controlled by radio from the tower. A pond under construction in front of the tower. Fan tripping 765 in Nickel Plate, Berkshire, passing the tower location in 1988. Notice all the brush in the foreground to be cleared away for the tower and backyard railroad at the time. U.S. Hobbies brass 2-rail 765 on the layout in my extended cellar. Note compressed distances. Lehigh Valley Alco PA diesels passing the model tower in my basement. It's sunset December 31st, 1999, and this was the last train to run through the Lehigh Valley in the 20th century. The last sunset of the 20th century. It's a hell of a controversy. Did the 20th century end in December 31st, or did it end in the year 2000? It depends on your opinion. Norfolk Executive's train passes the garden layout. The units were sold off shortly afterward. The painting of Pennsylvania Railroad's Hellgate Bridge in New York City. It was built and dedicated just before we entered World War I in April of 1917. Constructing the 20-foot G-gauge model. Little Conrail and Big Conrail. A photo by Victor Hand. Victor Hand was an employee of the railroad. The Lionel version from the 1929 catalog is the largest toy model bridge of them all. Taking a walk up to this bridge, Easter Sunday, 1972. I didn't have permission, and today I would probably be thrown in jail for 1,000 years as a terrorist. I spent a few hours photographing trains crossing the bridge. Here's a Penn Central unit bound for the Pennsylvania station in New York City. Easton native Jim Emery watches a train as it approaches the bridge. James Emery owned and operated the Hobby Hangout above 5th Street in Easton, PA. This is about 1949. Looking down Northampton Street in Easton, just above the Hobby Hangout in 1958. That's a 1957 Plymouth parked at the curb. In the early 1970s, James retired and sold the business to Philip Klopp, who moved it to a nearby constructed store on William Penn Highway in Palmer Township in 1980. Philip Klopp and myself at the hobby shop in 1993. Phil retired in 2008 and sold the property. It became a bookstore. Phil's layout was featured in Classic Toy Trains in the summer of 1988. Part of Phil's 3-rail layout. Construction of the Jersey City platform. Train shed looking east on the G-gauge layout. Looking west, 14 tracks ran into the train shed. The station at Jersey City G-scale. The prototype right on the Hudson River. An aerial view taken about 1950 shows New York City skyline in the background. A train show and sale in the station, 1987. Laying the foundation for West Portal Station in 1992. Foundation down, siding going up. A-frames going up, finishing the roof supports, applying the shingles, finish station in the bitterness of wintertime, all lit up for Christmas Eve. Having a classic car show. Red 57 Chevy belongs to high school classmate Steve Wessey. The Hallowtown-bound trolley crossing Jersey Central's main line at East Freemansburg about 1910. Freemansburg today considers itself a canal town, and indeed it once was. Named after Jacob Freeman, it was settled in 1830 and incorporated in 1854. It once contained 3 boatyards where 100 canal boats were built and repaired annually by hundreds of men. As auto traffic became heavy, an underpass was built. After Jersey Central abandoned all lines in Pennsylvania in 1972, the dangerous underpass was filled in and the road was moved 100 yards to the west. The Little Freemansburg Station in 1940, looking east. Station in Washburn Shanty, looking west. Eastbound passenger train at Freemansburg blocking Madison Street. The old Freemansburg Bridge on the west end of Main Street, in front of the old Freemansburg Bar, which is now apartments. Jersey Central passenger train eastbound, just behind the Freemansburg Bar. The Central had about 5 of these unique locomotives built by Baldwin Locomotive Works of Philadelphia. Roaring through Freemansburg about 1948. Looking west from the end of Main Street. The August 1955 flood had the track almost covered. Scrappers are finished clearing up the line through Freemansburg in 1980. The line was torn up from west east into Bethlehem, 1978-81. Freemansburg Bridge looking north about 1910. Trolley headed south to Hellertown. Note steps down to the Lehigh Valley Station. Lehigh Valley Station, actually closer to Steel City than Freemansburg, but Steel City had very few homes in 1906. Freemansburg Station looking west. Bethlehem Steel, westbound Conrail, and Freemansburg Bridge from a photo I took in 1981. Whippany River locomotive on the Lehigh Valley side track under the Freemansburg Bridge in October 1975. Loco hauls tourists in Florida today on a scenic railroad. Eastbound Conrail freight in May 1986. Crossing the bridge in 1988. Construction of replacement bridge in April 1990. Placement bridge piers in 1990. A late winter storm in March 1990. Eastbound freight in January 1990. Man in red helmet is a Conrail employee who was hired to warn workers about the trains coming. Almost 100 years have passed between these two bridges. Notice the difference in the piers. Morning Call article about the demolition of the bridge. After it was blown into the river, it was cut up and hauled away as scrap. The entrance on the south side is a very sharp 90-degree curve. Many speeders found it out the hard way. I had no place on the layout for it, but I did build the station in half-inch scale just for show. On our next video, we'll take a look at Bethlehem.